Assassin's Creed is probably one of my most favorite game series in recent history. It has everything one would want or need from a historic game. Great storytelling, good visuals for the historical places, and many historic figures of the time. But did you ever wonder what the origin story of the Assassins is? Stay with me on this video for the true story behind the Assassin legacy. To start our tale of the Assassins, we first need to talk a little bit about the Islamic faith, as this was the main reason the Assassins even existed. The two main directions of Islam are the Shia and the Sunni belief, where the Sunni make up about 85% of the Islamic world and the Shia about 14%. The Shia themselves are also made up of different societies, including the 12 Shia, the Alevites, the Zaydids, and the group where our assassins will fall in, the Ismailites. The Ismailites were probably the most radical splinter group of the Shia at the time. They shared their secret doctrines only with their followers and were from the beginning a very revolutionary-minded people who tried to missionize the Muslim world to their true faith. This in turn led to hatred from their Sunni cousins, and even their Shiite brothers eyed them with distrust. In the year 1094, the Ismailites again separated themselves. In this time, the Nizarites were founded. If the Ismailites were already very narrow-minded in their faith, the Nizarites were even more extremist. They would fall under what we would call today an extremist group, who wouldn't shy from murder, sleeper cells, and pre-modern terror attacks against their surrounding neighbors. So the Nizarites got a different name from their Sunni brothers, the Hashishiyun, or as we would call them today, the Assassins. Now, the Assassins got a lot of bad propaganda during this time period. The Sunnis, but also the Crusaders, surrounded them through a very mystical dust with very different reasons. While the Sunnis tried to discredit the Assassins and their beliefs, the Christians tried to explain them to the people in Europe, who were completely unfamiliar with the Muslim world. So let us hear the description of how the Assassins were initiated from a guy who visited them in the beginning of the 13th century, Marco Polo. And when the youths were waked up and they find themselves in there and see themselves in so fine a place, and they see all these things which I have told you, made just as the law of Muhammad says, and the damsels were round each one, always and all the day were singing and playing and making all the caresses and the lions which they could imagine, giving them food and most delicate wines, so that intoxicated with so many pleasures, and with the little streams of milk and wine which they saw, they believe that they are most truly in paradise. As I said, because the Assassins were already a small minority in their area, they needed to think outside of the box with recruiting. What they did was to take an initiate, drug him, and put him in an area where, as Marco Polo describes it, they would feel like as if they would be in Muslim paradise. They'd have women, wine, food, as much as they wanted. After a certain time, the Assassins would drug their initiates again and put them back to their masters. Naturally, the initiates wanted to go back to this place, and the masters promised them exactly that, if they would only follow the Nizarite faith. So most of them did. Their warriors who carried out such attacks were decent warriors, had a long training with knives and various other weapons. Still though, most of the time the assassins who carried out such attacks were doomed, as their target was usually well protected and the guards would kill them at the spot. Let's take another account from Marco Polo here. And when the old man wished to have any lord or any other man killed, he took some of these, his assassins, and sent them where he wished, and told them that he wished to send them carried by his angels to paradise, and that the ego kill such a man, and if they should die, that they will go immediately to paradise. The old man that Marco Polo describes is probably the most famous assassin leader of them all, Rashid ad-Din Sinan. Rashid was a masterful player in these power games, and he used his resources as well as possible. His chief enemy was the famous Saladin the Great, who would make himself up to smash the European crusaders who were still ruling in the Holy Land around Jerusalem. Saladin was a dreadful enemy to the Nazarite and the Ismailite faith, so Rashid sent out two assassins in a couple of years to kill Saladin and put his rule to an end. Both assassins failed, as Saladin was too well protected. Saladin was furious about this, so he laid siege to Masyaf to destroy the assassin threat once and for all. Rashid, though, didn't give up. Legend has it that he himself snuck into Saladin's tent at night and put a note on his table. The note called for negotiations with Rashid. He also left a dagger to symbol to Saladin that he could have been easily killed that night. Saladin was even more worried, so he agreed to a meeting. An envoy of the assassins went to Saladin and his tent. Saladin was surrounded by his advisors and two of his closest guards. The Envoy asked to speak Saladin alone, as the message was only for Saladin to hear. So Saladin sent out everybody except the 2 guards. So the Envoy asked again if he could speak him alone, because this message was only for him to hear. To this Saladin said that he could tell them everything, because he trusted them with his life. The Envoy smiled and said, "What if I tell these guards to kill you right now?" As he said that, the 2 guards pulled out their swords and held it to Saladin's head. Saladin, crushed by the realization that the 2 closest guards he had were actually assassin sleeper cells, agreed to a peace with the assassins. Rashid would go on and kill some more famous figures of the time, including Conrad of Montferrat, which was the heir to the Kingdom of Jerusalem. But the assassins were coming out of the shadows now and ruled their own territory for another 100 years until the Mamluks and the Mongols would finally crush the assassin order. Subscribe to this video for more stories about humanity and its amazing history.